Picture this. You're standing in line at Starbucks behind someone driving a brand new BMW, wearing a Rolex, and complaining loudly about their credit card being declined for a $5 latte. Meanwhile, the person in front of them just paid cash, drives a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and you later find out they're worth $8 million. Welcome to the upside-down world of modern wealth, where the people who look the poorest are often the richest, and the ones flashing money everywhere are usually broke. My name is Nick, and I've spent years studying how real wealth is built and maintained. If you're tired of the traditional advice that tells you to work harder and spend smarter, while ignoring the psychological game that separates the truly wealthy from everyone else, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button if this changes how you think about money. Here's something that will completely flip your understanding of wealth. According to research that tracked actual millionaires, not the ones you see on social media, most wealthy people live in middle-class neighborhoods, drive modest cars, and you'd never guess they have money. They've discovered something that most people completely miss. Acting broke isn't just about saving money. It's about rewiring your entire relationship with wealth in ways that compound over decades. Before we dive into why this counterintuitive strategy works so well, let me tell you about the most expensive mistake most people make without even realizing it. They think wealth is about looking wealthy. They believe that once you start making decent money, you should start spending like you make decent money. This is exactly backwards, and it's why most people who earn six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck, while someone making $40,000 a year is quietly building a fortune. The secret lies in understanding what researchers call stealth wealth, and it's based on a simple but powerful principle that most people never learn. The wealthy understand that there's a massive difference between looking rich and being rich. One requires spending money you may not have. The other requires keeping money you definitely do have. And choosing the wrong approach will determine whether you build lasting wealth or just create the illusion of success while remaining financially vulnerable. Let's start with why this works from a purely mathematical standpoint, because the numbers don't lie even when our instincts do. When you act broke while earning a decent income, something magical happens to your savings rate. Instead of lifestyle inflation eating up every raise and bonus, you're redirecting that money toward appreciating assets. The person making $60,000 a year who lives like they make $40,000 has $20,000 annually to invest. Meanwhile, the person making $100,000 who lives like they make $100,000 has $0 to invest, despite earning significantly more. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something most financial advisors won't tell you because it doesn't involve selling you expensive products. Acting broke creates a psychological advantage that goes far beyond just saving money. It fundamentally changes how you think about purchases, opportunities, and risk. When you maintain a modest lifestyle, you develop what wealthy people call abundance from scarcity. You have options that people living paycheck to paycheck simply don't have, even if those people earn more than you do. Consider what happens when you've been living below your means for several years. An amazing job opportunity comes along, but it's with a smaller company that offers equity instead of a guaranteed salary. Most people can't take that risk because they need their current paycheck to maintain their lifestyle, but when you've been acting broke and building savings, you can afford to bet on yourself. That's how ordinary people end up with extraordinary wealth, not through flashy spending, but through having the financial flexibility to take calculated risks when opportunities present themselves. This principle extends far beyond career moves. Maybe you've always wanted to start a business, but you need capital and a safety net. Perhaps an incredible real estate opportunity presents itself, but it requires a down payment and the ability to handle unexpected expenses. These scenarios happen constantly, but they're only available to people who have built financial reserves by living below their means rather than up to their means. The psychology gets even more fascinating when you realize how acting broke protects you from one of wealth's biggest enemies, other people's expectations. The moment people know you have money, everything changes. Suddenly, you're expected to pick up the tab at group dinners. Friends and family start asking for loans they may never repay. Business deals become more expensive because vendors assume you can afford to pay premium prices. Even worse, you become a target for scams, lawsuits, and people who want to separate you from your money. But when you act broke, you fly under the radar. People treat you normally. Vendors give you their best prices because they think you're price sensitive. Friends appreciate your company for who you are, not what you might do for them financially. You avoid the social complications that come with visible wealth while still enjoying all the security and options that actual wealth provides. There's also something called decision fatigue that wealthy people who act broke understand instinctively. When you simplify your lifestyle and avoid constantly upgrading everything you own, you free up mental energy for decisions that actually matter. Think about it this way. The person who spends hours researching the latest luxury car, then months shopping for the perfect model, then years worrying about payments and maintenance, has used enormous amounts of time and mental energy on something that depreciates in value. Meanwhile, the person who buys a reliable used car and drives it for 10 years has freed up all that time and energy for activities that actually build wealth. They can focus on their career, their investments, their side businesses, or their family. This isn't about being cheap or depriving yourself of nice things. It's about being strategic with your most precious resources: time, attention, and money. The research on this is pretty compelling. Studies show that people who prioritize time over money are significantly happier than those who prioritize money over time. But here's the paradox that most people miss. The best way to have more time is to have enough money that you don't have to worry about money. And the fastest way to build that financial foundation is to act like you don't have money even when you do. This creates a powerful feedback loop. Acting broke leads to higher savings rates, which leads to more investment capital, which leads to passive income, which leads to actual wealth, which leads to more time and options, which leads to greater life satisfaction. It's the exact opposite of what most people do, which is why most people never build lasting wealth despite earning decent incomes throughout their careers. But there's a darker side to this strategy that we need to address honestly. Acting broke when you're not actually broke requires incredible discipline and delayed gratification in a culture that worships instant everything. You'll watch friends and colleagues upgrade their lifestyles while you stick with your modest car and reasonable apartment. You'll see social media posts about luxury vacations while you're putting that money into index funds. There will be moments when you question whether you're missing out on life while everyone else is living it up. This is where understanding the long-term game becomes crucial. The people flashing wealth today may be struggling financially tomorrow. Market downturns, job losses, and unexpected expenses can quickly destroy lifestyles built on high spending and low savings. But the person who has been acting broke and building wealth has options. They have the financial resources to weather storms, take advantage of opportunities, and maintain their security regardless of external circumstances. The key is finding the right balance between acting broke and actually living. You don't want to become so focused on saving money that you forget to enjoy life. But you also don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that happiness comes from accumulating stuff. The sweet spot is understanding which expenses enhance your life and which ones just drain your resources while providing temporary satisfaction. This brings us to what I call the stealth wealth sweet spot. And it's where most people completely misunderstand the game. They think acting broke means living like a monk and never spending money on anything enjoyable. That's not stealth wealth, that's just being cheap. And there's a massive difference between the two approaches. The wealthy who act broke understand that strategic spending is still spending, but it's invisible to outsiders and focused on things that actually improve their lives rather than their image. For example, a stealth wealth practitioner might drive a 10-year-old Toyota Camry, but they'll spend money on high quality experiences with their family. They might live in a modest house, but they'll invest in their health, their education, or their personal development. The difference is that these investments don't scream wealth to the outside world, but they compound over time in ways that flashy purchases never do. Meanwhile, the person buying a luxury car to look successful is often sacrificing their family vacation fund, their emergency savings, or their retirement contributions. Here's where it gets really interesting from a behavioral psychology standpoint. When you practice stealth wealth consistently, you develop what researchers call intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. Instead of buying things to impress other people or meet social expectations, you start making decisions based on what actually adds value to your life. This shift is subtle, but incredibly powerful because it breaks the endless cycle of keeping up with others that traps most people in financial mediocrity. Think about the last time you bought something expensive primarily because you wanted other people to see you with it. Maybe it was a watch, a handbag, or upgrading your phone when your current one worked perfectly fine. How long did that feeling of satisfaction last? A few days, a few weeks? Now think about how that money could have grown if you'd invested it instead. That's the hidden cost of status spending that most people never calculate. But let's get practical about how this actually works in real life, because knowing the theory is one thing and implementing it is something else entirely. The first step is understanding what I call financial camouflage. This means making choices that keep your wealth invisible while still allowing you to build it aggressively. It's about flying under the radar in ways that protect you from both external pressure and internal temptation. Financial camouflage starts with your housing situation. While everyone else is stretching to buy the biggest house they can qualify for, stealth wealth practitioners buy significantly less house than they can afford. This isn't about living in a dump or being uncomfortable. It's about understanding that your house payment directly impacts every other financial decision you make. The person paying $3,000 a month for housing has $3,000 less dollars available for investments compared to the person paying $1,500 for housing, even if they earn the same income. The same principle applies to transportation. The average car payment in America is now over $700 per month, and that's before insurance, maintenance, and fuel costs. Over the lifetime of that loan, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars that could have been invested instead. The stealth wealth approach is buying a reliable used vehicle and driving it until the repair costs exceed the car's value. This isn't about being embarrassed by your car. It's about understanding that cars are depreciating assets that take money out of your pocket every month. But here's what's fascinating about this approach, and it's something that separates true stealth wealth from just being frugal. When you consistently live below your means and invest the difference, you reach a point where you can afford almost anything you want, but you choose not to buy it because you understand the opportunity cost. This is financial confidence at its highest level. You're not avoiding expensive purchases because you can't afford them. You're avoiding them because you've calculated what else that money could do for you. This creates an interesting paradox that most people never experience. The more wealth you build through acting broke, the less you want to spend money on things that don't genuinely improve your life. It's not about deprivation at all. It's about having so many options that you become incredibly selective about which ones you choose. When you know that $20,000 could generate passive income for decades, spending it on a luxury car that will be worth half that amount in 3 years starts to feel absurd. The social dynamics of this approach are equally fascinating and somewhat counterintuitive. You might expect that acting broke would hurt your social life or professional opportunities, but the opposite is usually true. People respect authenticity, and there's something genuinely attractive about someone who's confident enough to drive an older car or wear modest clothes without feeling the need to explain or apologize for their choices. In professional settings, acting broke can actually enhance your credibility. When colleagues see that you're not trying to impress anyone with expensive possessions, they tend to take your opinions more seriously. You're seen as someone who makes decisions based on logic rather than emotion, which is exactly the kind of person others want to work with on important projects or business deals. There's also the factor of what psychologists call social proof working in reverse. When people see you consistently making modest choices, they assume you're financially responsible, which often leads to better opportunities. Banks offer better rates to customers who appear financially stable. Employers prefer candidates who seem like they make good, long-term decisions. Even potential romantic partners are often more attracted to financial stability than flashy spending. The compound effect of these advantages is remarkable. Not only are you building wealth faster by keeping your expenses low, but you're also positioning yourself for opportunities that wouldn't be available to someone who appears financially stretched. It's like being in a secret club where the membership requirement is not talking about being in the club. But let's address the elephant in the room that makes this strategy challenging for many people. We live in a culture that equates success with consumption. And going against that cultural programming requires genuine confidence in your own values and long-term vision. When your coworker shows up in a brand new BMW, part of your brain is going to wonder if you're making a mistake by sticking with your paid-off Honda. When your friends are posting vacation photos from expensive resorts, you might question whether you're being too conservative with your money. This is where understanding the mathematics of wealth building becomes your psychological anchor. Every dollar you don't spend on status symbols is a dollar that can compound over decades. Every monthly payment you avoid is money that can generate passive income. Every time you choose substance over image, you're making a decision that your future self will thank you for. The people who understand this math sleep better at night, even if they drive older cars and live in modest homes. The beautiful thing about stealth wealth is that it's a strategy that works regardless of your income level. Whether you're making $50,000 a year or $500,000 a year, the principles remain the same. Live below your means, invest the difference, avoid lifestyle inflation, and let compound interest work its magic over time. The specific dollar amounts might be different, but the percentage of income going toward wealth building should be consistently high regardless of how much you earn. This is why some of the wealthiest people you'll never hear about made their fortunes in the most boring industries imaginable. While everyone else was chasing the latest tech startup or cryptocurrency trend, these stealth wealth builders were quietly dominating markets for things like cup holder manufacturing, commercial carpet cleaning, and industrial appliance maintenance. Not exactly the stuff of Hollywood movies, but incredibly profitable because nobody else wanted to compete in those spaces. There's something almost comedic about this when you think about it. The person getting rich from selling specialized screws to manufacturing plants is probably driving a 15-year-old pickup truck, while the person trying to build the next social media empire is leasing a Tesla they can't afford to impress investors who see right through the charade. One of them understands that wealth is built through consistent cash flow from unglamorous businesses. The other thinks wealth is built through looking like you're already wealthy. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive aspects of stealth wealth that most people never consider. When you act broke consistently over years, you develop an almost supernatural ability to spot real opportunities versus fake ones. It's like your financial radar becomes incredibly sensitive to what actually generates money versus what just looks impressive. The person who's been practicing stealth wealth for a decade can walk into any situation and immediately identify where the real value lies. They're not distracted by flashy presentations or smooth talking salespeople because they've trained themselves to focus on fundamentals. Meanwhile, the person who's been chasing status symbols has developed the opposite skill set. They've become expert at recognizing what looks good rather than what works well. This skill transfers to every area of life in ways that compound over time. In real estate, the stealth wealth practitioner buys the modest house in the great neighborhood, while everyone else stretches for the mansion in the mediocre area. In investing, they put money into boring index funds while others chase hot stock tips. In career decisions, they choose the company with solid fundamentals over the startup with the coolest office space. What's fascinating is how this approach creates its own momentum. The more you practice acting broke while building wealth, the better you become at making decisions that prioritize substance over style. And the better you become at those decisions, the faster your wealth grows, which gives you even more options to continue making smart choices rather than impressive ones. But here's where the psychology gets really interesting, and it's something that separates temporary wealth from generational wealth. Most people who suddenly come into money, whether through inheritance, lottery winnings, or a successful business exit, lose it within a few years. They never developed the mental habits that preserve and grow wealth because they skipped the process of learning to act broke first. So there you have it. The secret to building real wealth isn't learning how to spend money like you're rich. It's learning how to not spend money while you actually become rich. Your future millionaire self is probably driving a Honda Civic right now, and that's exactly where they should be.